Robert I. Sutton. The No Asshole Rule. Building a Civilized Workplace and Surviving One That Isn't. Blink number 1. Asshole is the right term for people who regularly bully or put down others. We all have bad days and act like assholes now and then. Occasionally, we can all be temporary assholes. Certified assholes, on the other hand, are people whose asshole behavior is not a temporary outburst on a bad day. Rather, it is part of their character. These are people whose bad behavior is continuous and long-term. This hostile behavior can be expressed both physically and mentally. It may be verbal or nonverbal. In the workplace, assholes may interrupt others while they are speaking, violate their personal space, insult and intimidate them, put them down, stare at them aggressively, or ignore them altogether. Assholes leave their victims angry, afraid, and humiliated. Assholes often get away with this poor behavior because they treat their own bosses and customers respectfully. This can be an effective way of hiding their true nature if lower-level employees feel the asshole's good reputation with superiors would lead to complaints being ignored. Blink number 2. Assholes are bad for business, especially when they hold management positions. Lots of workplaces tolerate poor behavior without realizing the damage it causes. In offices where asshole behavior goes unchallenged, employee morale is undeniably lower than in comparable workplaces that maintain a friendly, respectful, and professional atmosphere. This has a huge effect on everyone's productivity, as assholes sap their colleagues' energy. Both direct victims as well as onlookers are affected. Employees with low morale may react by skipping work, producing poor results, or even stealing. Assholes in positions of power are particularly damaging. The employees under their management work with the constant threat of humiliation and use their energy on avoiding that threat rather than focusing on good work. This quickly leads to a fearful, unproductive atmosphere. Tolerating assholes is therefore a costly mistake for a business. The quality of work suffers, and the best employees who have more options available leave for asshole-free workplaces. Blink number 3. To create a great working environment, businesses should adopt the no asshole rule. All too often, assholes are tolerated in the workplace. Their temper tantrums and spitefulness are put down as character flaws, and they're excused because they are talented, smart, or difficult to replace. But in tolerating them, businesses are doing themselves a grave disservice. To put it another way, employees who make others feel uncomfortable or upset are incompetent, regardless of their other qualities or abilities. This no asshole rule must be applied to all people, whatever their qualifications. Assholes should be weeded out from the workplace from the very beginning. The founders and managers of a business should make it clear that all workers deserve to be treated with respect. This pays its own reward in loyalty and high employee morale. To put this rule into effect, it needs to be well known by all employees. Google's slogan, "Don't be evil," is a good example of how such a policy can be effectively communicated across the company. The rule should also be extended to customers and clients, as their behavior can have just as much of an effect on job satisfaction and morale as an employee's. Some airlines, for example, blacklist customers who have mistreated their staff by screaming at them or threatening them. Blink number 4. More equality means fewer assholes. Studies have shown that people given higher status are more likely to behave like assholes. They are likely to talk more than others, take what they want without considering the people around them, take personal credit for group efforts, and generally tend to use others as a means to an end. One interesting study had groups of 3 students discuss various issues, with 1 student per group randomly chosen to rate the other's arguments, therefore bestowing them with a higher status in the group. But the study was actually about observing how the students ate from a shared plate of cookies, and the results showed the higher status students were more likely to break social conventions, taking the last cookie, chewing with their mouth open, and leaving more crumbs behind. A similar effect is noticeable in the business world. The greater the difference in status between managers and employees, the more likely the lower-ranking workers are treated disrespectfully. In order to reduce asshole behavior, a business should seek to reduce hierarchy between employees. This leads to more respectful behavior between managers and subordinates. One way of doing this is to keep wage differences as narrow as possible. Earnings are the clearest sign of status in the business world. By keeping wage gaps as modest as possible, a company can reduce the differences in status that lead to workplace bullying. Blink number 5. We've evolved to have assholes as leaders, but motivating employees with incentives is far more effective. Being an asshole carries some advantages. Studies have shown that people who act aggressively and recklessly at work are often regarded not only as cold and unpleasant, but also as competent and resourceful. There can be fierce rivalries between competing managers and companies, and the most aggressive one often wins. Being cold and ruthless can be just as much of an advantage in the business world as in the mafia or a tribe of chimpanzees. This can be explained by evolution. Throughout the rise of man, the most aggressive, loudest member of any group usually became its leader. Hence, our brains have evolved to associate aggression with high status. However, this doesn't mean that companies should promote assholes to positions of power or tolerate their aggression in the first place. Aggressive strategies for outcompeting rivals do not translate well into good management techniques. Rather than motivating subordinates, they often have the exact opposite effect. The best employees, who can easily find work elsewhere, are less likely to stay in a negative atmosphere that tolerates assholes. The people who stay behind are those that have few other options. Assholes drive away the cream of the workforce, so implementing the no asshole rule will help to attract and retain talented workers. The two things that best motivate people are incentives and recognition, both inherently positive techniques. Not only do they get more enduring results than aggression and punishment, a tyrant's power only lasts as long as they're around to enforce it, but they also keep office morale high. Blink number 6. To create a civilized, productive workplace, focus on cooperation rather than internal competition. The business world is a cutthroat environment. Competition between firms is fierce and unending, and all too often this attitude is carried over into companies' internal cultures. Of course, healthy competition between individuals can be good for a company. Ambition is a great way to motivate employees to work harder, take risks, and come up with new ideas. However, in the scramble for advancement, rivalries can turn sour, and the best interests of the company are easily forgotten. Too much internal competition can effectively hamstring a company and make it an uncivilized, unproductive workplace. This is the reason that most successful companies are often those in which internal competition is restrained and a culture of cooperation is fostered. Not only does this create a more civilized atmosphere, but also produces better results. To achieve this, it's important, first of all, to note and reward cooperation. Even subtle things, such as the choice of vocabulary, can have a surprising effect on a company's culture. Replacing aggressive, often warlike words and phrases, the enemy, battleground, and so forth, with more positive alternatives that stress cooperation, such as help, fairness, and community, can be particularly effective. Simple changes like referring to we, our, and us rather than I, my, and them can subconsciously remind employees that they're all on the same team and encourage cooperation rather than destructive competition that saps time and energy. Blink number 7. Avoid assholes, or you'll become one yourself. Being an asshole is a highly contagious condition. The saying, if you lie down with dogs, you will get up with fleas, is true for assholes as well. Simply being around angry and aggressive people can noticeably alter your mood and behavior. If you work in a rude and disrespectful culture, you'll soon get used to rudeness and lack of respect, and gradually also begin to exhibit those behaviors towards others. Being an asshole also has a way of creeping into your private life. Sutton himself notes how he started treating his wife poorly after spending too much time among assholes. To avoid becoming a certified asshole in both your business and private life, avoid assholes as much as possible. Of course, you can't always choose your coworkers, so if avoiding assholes isn't an option, try to keep contact to a minimum. It helps to think of assholes as a virus. You'd avoid close contact with a colleague who has the flu, so treat people afflicted with assholism the same way. It's always easier to change something from the start than later on. If you've already invested a lot of time and energy into a relationship with an asshole, it's going to be more difficult to distance yourself from them. So, whenever you meet an asshole, make it your immediate priority to keep your exposure time as short as possible. Blink number 8. Don't let assholes get to you. Build emotional distance. In many workplaces, it's impossible to completely avoid contact with assholes. Working with, or worse, under an asshole can be demoralizing, even if you don't immediately realize how much stress it actually causes. Therefore, it's important to have a strategy for getting through the day emotionally unscathed. Generally, the most important thing is to not let an asshole drag you down to his level. It's difficult, but try to remain calm. Don't respond to aggression with more aggression, and keep as much distance as possible between you and any hurtful things being said. It may help to remind yourself that the person you're dealing with is just an asshole, no matter how senior they may be. To build emotional distance when interacting with assholes, keep a positive frame of mind. Remember, the problem is only temporary. You're not the cause of the problem. It's not going to ruin the rest of your life. If someone is an asshole, that's their problem, not yours. When anticipating an uncomfortable situation with an asshole, it's helpful to hope for the best while preparing for the worst. Happiness and sadness is found in the difference between what you expect and what you experience. Blink number 9. Everyone should use the no asshole rule at all times. Whether you're at the office or at home, it only takes one asshole to ruin a conversation. Even if everyone else is behaving normally, one asshole can spoil the mood for the entire room. Negative events have 5 times the effect on our mood compared to positive ones, meaning that if 5 nice people brighten your day by complimenting you or bringing you good news, it only takes one asshole to bring you back down to where you started. So everyone should know about and apply the no asshole rule, both in their professional and private lives. This means 0 tolerance for assholes. That said, it's also important to avoid becoming an asshole yourself, or, if you think you might already be one, to try to change that negative behavior. The first step is to take an honest look at yourself in the mirror and think about the last time you acted like an asshole. The way to avoid being an asshole is simple. Be friendly and respectful to other people at all times and expect the same treatment in return. Life's too short to put up with assholes. You've just listened to our blinks to The No Asshole Rule by Robert I. Sutton. The key message in this book is that companies should have a 0 tolerance policy towards assholes and bad behavior. This raises employee morale, productivity, and company loyalty. One last thing. We'd sure love to hear what you think about our